You are listening to the SpaceVessel Mysteries podcast. We are continuing Anna Gale Line's second novel in the Jaguar and Peacock series, Without Clearance. Colonel Jessa Masters, a fearless and seasoned federal agent for the Intergalactic Intelligence Bureau, IIB, commands the SpaceVessel Liberty with unparalleled precision. Alongside her partner and husband, Nate Masters, a skilled investigator with a sharp intellect, she has faced some of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. But nothing could prepare them for their next mission, a personal one. When a fellow federal agent is found brutally murdered aboard the Liberty, the crime scene is not just a professional setback, it's a chilling threat that hits too close to home. As Jessa and Nate dig deeper, they uncover clues that suggest this murder is no random act of violence. It's part of a decades-old vendetta, a sinister plot aimed at dismantling Jessa's entire family. As the walls close in, and with more lives hanging in the balance, Jessa must confront dark secrets from her past that were buried long ago. Betrayals come to light, trust is shattered, and the line between friend and foe blurs as they unravel a conspiracy. With time running out and danger closing in, Jessa and Nate must race against an unseen enemy who will stop at nothing to take down the family legacy. Can they solve the murder before it's too late, or will Jessa's past finally catch up with her in a deadly reckoning? Without Clearance is a high-stakes, action-packed space thriller filled with twists, conspiracies, and a powerful tale of love and loyalty in the face of overwhelming danger. This is episode 3, Not All Is As It Seems. If you have not subscribed, do so now, and if you are on YouTube, hit the bell to be notified of new episodes.
I ran, trying to catch my breath, feeling as if a steel beam fell on my chest, crushing it. Looking back, I saw him. Tall and massive and not one bit handsome. He had a face only a mother could love. A giant black bear chased me. His paws in the air, just waiting to pounce on me once I let my guard down. He stood on all fours and roared so thunderously that the ground behind me literally shook. "Come on, Peak. We have to get out of here," the woman next to me screamed. Her shoulder-length, blonde hair streaked with strands of brown flew as she sped away from me. She called me Peak. She must be an agent too, I concluded. From what I could see, she had a thin yet muscular frame. She obviously spent more than a few days a week in the gym. Her face glowed with a healthy tan, which told me she had resided, or took a vacation, on Earth or one of its colonies in recent weeks. Her nose seemed perfectly straight, almost as if she had it corrected. Her lips dried and parched. I saw a house in the distance, and I raced toward it. But instead I tripped on a giant boulder and fell into a hole. I seemed to be falling forever. Then I hit the bottom hard. Looking up, I saw the blonde-haired woman peering down at me. Her hand was extended as if trying to help me. Her celestial blue eyes, the color of the water when the sun hits it, shone despite the darkness all around me. "Get help," I yelled at the woman, the sound of my heart beating pulsated in my ears. I slowly opened my eyes, blinking several times to clear the sleep out of them. Even in the darkness, I could make out the shadows of my blonde pine wood, vertical bookcase that stood in the southwest corner of the master bedroom. I ran my eyes over the matching half-moon nightstands that sat on each side of the bed. Their trim had been painted the same color as my vanity across the room, jet black. Nestled between the walk-in closet and the entrance, the surface of the vanity stretched 24 inches. A thick piece of glass covered it. Affixed to the back of the vanity, a golden leaf frame held the mirror I checked my reflection in every morning before I rushed out the door. I am aboard the Liberty. I am in my room in my quarters aboard the Liberty. Thank God, it was only a nightmare. Somehow it seemed familiar, as if I had dreamed it before. Had I? With a huge gap still present in my memory, I didn't know what I dreamed in the last 6 months. I patted the form sleeping next to me. I let out the breath I had been holding. Nate's here. He's safe. I sat up in bed, trying to calm my racing heart. I found it hard to do. 1,000 questions marched through my mind. Who was that woman? And what did she want? She had to be in my dream for a reason. Okay, maybe, she didn't. It could have just been a pizza dream, but somehow I doubted it. Nate felt behind him. When he found my hand, he clutched it. "Are you okay, Peek?" "Not really, Jag," I told him, my eyes widened in alarm. I felt the blood drain from my face as the reality of the dream set in. I knew with every fiber of my being that I experienced that dream before. I just couldn't be certain when. As if confirming my suspicions, the hairs on the back of my arms stood up. Something was definitely wrong. "It's starting again, Jag." He sat up and draped his arm around me. "What's happening again?" he whispered. "The reoccurring nightmares, Jag." I snuggled next to him, leaning my head on his shoulder. He twisted my hair around his fingers. "The one about the doctor injecting people, Peek?" "No, Jag, in this one, a woman and I are being chased by a bear. I trip over a boulder and fall down a well. The woman looked familiar, as if I am supposed to know her. I closed my eyes briefly, just sitting silently in the dark with my husband. I still didn't remember our wedding or his proposal, but that didn't matter. Not in this moment, at least. I felt safe in his arms, and, for tonight, that's all I cared about. I heard the voice in my gut, screaming, "Watch out! There is danger ahead." I tried to ignore it, but the voice just kept getting louder and more persistent. Sometimes when danger lay ahead, I had reoccurring nightmares. Although I couldn't recall actually having this one before, somehow I knew I had. "So you've had this dream before tonight," Nate stated in the interrogative tone he took when he grilled a hardened criminal. "This is exactly what I am talking about, Peek. How can we bring someone else's kid into this family when danger is looming ahead? What is the real reason you don't want Jeremy to come live with us? Don't you want to have kids with me?" I demanded, lifting my head. I craned it to see him better, looking him in the eye. "I'm good enough to marry, Jaguar, but not good enough to have kids with. Is that it?" No, Peek, you've got me all wrong," he insisted, reaching up to stroke my cheek. "I definitely want to have children with you. But right now, Peek, we are in the middle of a war." He gestured around the room. "And we live on a star vessel. This is our home. I know this is the life we chose, but Peek, if we got fired upon, both Jeremy and Reggie could die." I leaned over and slid open my nightstand drawer. "I have a secret weapon, Jag." I retrieved my black Bible. Its cover worn from too much use. It had been passed down from my great-grandmother to my grandmother to my mother and, now, down to me. I slammed shut the drawer, then flipped through the pages to a familiar passage toward the middle of the Bible. The pages wrinkled and wearing thin. "Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways," I read to him, peering at Nate from the corner of my eye. "Every morning I pray the 91 Sup Psalm over my family. It's the chapter of protection, Jag." "How long have you been doing this?" he questioned, grabbing the Bible from me. Pointing to the verses, I supplied, "It's the 9th, 10th and 11th verses." His eyes stared at the pages incredulously when he saw that what I read matched the words written on it. I'll admit it. Ben's dying really scared me. I mean, if it could happen to him, it could happen to you or me. Or even an innocent bystander like Joey, Colin or Reggie. I thought seriously about quitting the Freedom Alliance and the IIB. I wanted to hide out in my house forever. I started, playing with the tattered edge of the blue quilt that covered our bed. I made a mental note to redo the edging on the blanket. Nate, Joey and Ben's mother, Jessa Masters, bought it for me when she learned Ben and I were expecting our first child. Maybe I should get rid of it. Or give it to Reggie or Joey. Perhaps sleeping on the quilt that his mother gave to Ben and me made Nate uncomfortable. We were married now. And Ben, albeit his brother, was my first husband. I glanced up and caught his questioning gaze. Then I read this book. Ben bought it for me and kept urging me to read it, but I never did. Consumed with obsessive thoughts, I picked it up and read the account of how these soldiers in the Desert Storm War in 1990 prayed that chapter over themselves every day, I recalled, motioning toward the Bible. I straightened up and shifted toward him. None of them died or got hurt, Jag. I decided that if it worked for them, it had to work for me because God is not a respecter of persons. Then, Peek, let's pray it every morning on our jog. He cradled my chin in his hands, kissing me slowly. Now about your dream, Peek, you said there was a woman in it. What did she look like? His face was less than an inch away from mine. Blonde with blue eyes. Perfectly aligned nose. Has a tan. Thin but looks like she works out, I replied slowly, touching his cheek with my hand to make sure he wasn't some trick my mind was playing on me. Why, Jag? He twisted at his waist. He seized the quan pad off the top of his nightstand and instructed, Chip, raise the nightstand lights please. The computer aboard the Liberty named CHIP refused to carry out an order unless called by its name. The ship designers thought that this quirk in the computer system would give it a personal touch. It was a machine. Why did it need a personal touch? It needed to access information. Nothing more. Nothing less. The nightstand lights flickered on, causing Nate and me to blink several times to adjust our eyes to the light. His fingers furiously punched buttons on the quan pad. When he finished, he handed it to me. Is this the woman you saw in your dream, Peek? He tapped the computer screen with his index finger. The woman on the screen had her blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail. Dressed in a pair of black flight coveralls, I noticed the silver eagle on her lapel. Celestial blue eyes. Check. Perfectly aligned nose. Check. Blonde hair with brown streaks. Check. Had a tan and a thin frame. Check and check. Yes, I am sure this is the same woman. Who is she, Jag? Brooklyn Curzon, the woman who was murdered, Nate announced, sharing a troubled look with me. Which means, Peek, whoever was after Brooklyn, could very well be targeting you next. That's why I didn't recognize her. By the time I saw her, she had been battered and bruised. Look, Jag, I don't know what happened to Brooklyn Curzon, I exclaimed, waving my hands around empathically. I don't know how she was killed, Jag. I have no reason why I was standing over her body. Nate took a deep breath and folded his arms. And, Peek, someone is trying very hard to keep it that way. So, Jag, we only have one hypothesis to work from. I saw something that I wasn't supposed to. Exactly, Peek. The question is, Jag, what did I see? I think the answer may lie in whatever case Brooklyn Curzon was working. I am going to ask Graham for permission to go through her personal and professional logs, Nate noted, drumming his fingers against his arm. Already done. I talked to him this afternoon, Jag. He and I figured we would need them. I settled back into my spot on the bed, leaning against Nate. Good work, Peacock, Nate complimented, unfolded his arms, slipping one around my shoulders. I trained you well, Peek. He bent his head toward me and brushed his lips against mine. Chip, play Brooklyn Curzon's professional log starting with June 11, 2150. Audio only, I charged the computer. That's your birthday, Peek. You can't even remember it, can you? The dinner. The party. The cake. I shook my head. Authorization required, came the computer's response. Alpha Alpha Zulu Charlie Echo, I provided Chip. Authorization successful, Chip finally concluded after what seemed as if we had been waiting an hour. In reality, it had been closer to a few minutes. Agent Brooklyn Curzon's log, June 11, 2150. For the past several months, I have been working to stop a drug smuggling ring. The parts seem to be originating from the USS Liberty. Several weeks ago, I transferred to the USS Liberty. Graham thought it would be best if I contacted Colonel and Lieutenant Colonel Masters about my assignment. They are both federal agents and could help me if I need backup. I convinced him to let me handle this assignment by myself for now. The deeper I delve into this case, the more I regret making that decision. This is far more than one agent can handle. To rectify the situation, I made an appointment to meet with Colonel Masters tomorrow morning. Curzon out. Chip, stop. A drug smuggling ring aboard my vessel, I barked, looking at Nate. He threw his hands up in the air. Hey, Peek, don't look at me. This is the first I am hearing about it. Why didn't you let me in on the investigation? Jag, I don't remember there being a drug ring, nevertheless why I didn't tell you about it. You're right. I'm sorry, he agreed, kissing the top of my head. Chip, play Brooklyn Curzon's professional log, June 12, 215150, I bid the computer. Agent Brooklyn Curzon's log, June 12, 2151, I met Colonel Masters this morning. At first, she seemed angry. She sat behind her desk. Arms folded. She didn't say anything for the longest time. She just stared at me. One of those withering stares that make you want to confess to any crime you may have remotely been involved with. Then she rose from her chair and came around to the front. She leaned against her desk with her hands gripping the edge. She insisted that we tell her partner Nate Masters, but I begged her not to. The less people involved, the better. She eventually relented, but I could tell she wasn't very happy about it. We made a pretty good team. She and I managed to track down where the drugs are coming from the infirmary. Curzon out. Well, I think we need to have a chat with our Dr. Manning tomorrow, don't you, Jag? I noted. My eyes became very heavy. I heard Nate consent before I gave in to sleep. You must be Jeremy Curzon, I greeted them, maybe a tad taller than most boys his age. Blonde-haired boy Colin ushered into my office. I moved from behind my desk, around to the front. I motioned for him to sit down. I leaned against the front of the desk, clutching its edges. I raked my eyes over him. He looked a lot like the woman I saw in my dream. The same blonde hair minus the brown streaks, the same blue eyes, only his were more of a sky blue, the same thin-built and tan complexion. And you must be my mom's friend, Jessa. I am sorry, Colonel Masters, he said in a low voice. He stared at his hands. Never up at me. Mom told me pretty nice things about you. She told me if anything happened to her, I would live with you. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be such an inconvenience. I put my finger under his chin and forced him to look at me. I saw how scarlet his face was, how swollen it was from crying. His eyes were dark with pain. My heart ached for him. I knew that pain. The pain of losing someone you truly loved like my Ben, and my Joshua. I just wanted to scoop him up in my arms and hug him, but I thought it might be too much for him. You are not an inconvenience, Jeremy. We are happy to have you join our family. He looked away. I don't want to replace your mother, Jeremy. No one ever could. Just as my husband can't replace your father. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be your friend. A friend who has been where you are right now. He turned his head back and caught my eye. You lost your mother too, Colonel? No, Jeremy, but I did lose my son. Did the pain ever go away, Colonel? I shook my head negatively. It hasn't been quite a year yet, but no, it hasn't. He moved toward me. I opened my arms, sensing that he could use that hug now. He rushed into my arms and started sobbing. I rubbed his back as he wept. The shoulder of my leather bomber jacket now drenched. I probably should have taken it off before I let him cry on my shoulder. A few minutes later, he pulled away and wiped his tears with the back of his hand, looking at me expectantly. A knock came at the doors. I glanced down at my watch. 1,200 hours. Nate. We agreed to meet for lunch a half hour ago. I wondered what held him up. Was he grilling a witness for our case? Did he have to help a crew member with a problem? Maybe there was an emergency. Come in, Jag, I called in the direction of the doors. To Jeremy, I asked, have you had lunch yet? I know you probably don't feel like eating, but you have to keep your strength up. The boy shook his head, patting his stomach. I could hear his stomach growling. I think I could eat a little something, Colonel. I glanced over at the dark-haired man who looked as perfect as a model who walked off the runway in Paris. Not a hair strayed. Not a wrinkle on his rugged, handsome face. He leaned against the doorway, grinning. Jeremy followed my gaze. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. Jag, this is Jeremy Curzon, I introduced, gesturing to the boy. I bent my head to look at Jeremy. And Jeremy, this is my husband, Lieutenant Colonel Nate Masters. Nate lost his brother, my first husband, and nephew, my son, last year as the result of a car crash, so he is a part of the club too. Nate stuck out his hand, which Jeremy readily shook. Jeremy glanced from Nate to me. Would it be all right if you called me Remy, Colonel? That's what everyone calls me. No problem. Remy, it is, I consented in a soothing tone. I posed, scratching the back of my neck. Remy, what do you want to call us? Would it be okay if I called you Jessa and Nate, Colonel, he proposed. When I nodded, Remy gave me a sidelong glance. Jessa, why do you call him Jag? Do you mind if we discuss this in the mess hall over lunch? Nate suggested, reaching for my hand. I have had a morning full of meetings, Remy, Nate justified, peeking over at the boy, and I am starving. Without waiting for an answer, Nate led us out the doors to the travel tram.